people. And if you're watching live, checking us out on YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast provider, you are most definitely my people. Welcome to another episode of Botched, Bots, and Chair Shots. I'm your host, a chef by trade and a mark by choice. I am the Will Gray, and joining me tonight, he is host of the Kings of the Ring podcast. He is host and general manager of the Wrestle Addict Radio. He is the Kiing, Rickie Rozay. Rickie, how are you, brother? Thanks for coming on and chat about some wrestling, man. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm having a good day. I went to see Shazam, and it was actually pretty good. But, and I'm glad that I'm not watching an A&E WWE documentary on Jerry the King Lawler. I feel like we know everything about him.
Everything we need to know about Jerry the King Lawler has already been out there.
And too much about him already.
Absolutely, 100%. Sort of. I'm a Tennessee guy. I like my Lawler, but I'm very particular about which Jerry Lawler we discuss. And joining us tonight as well, making his triumphant return to Botched, Bots, and Chair Shots, he's been on a time or two. He is the host of the Apron Bump podcast. During the show, it's the hardest part of the ring. After the show, he moonlights as the Ring of Honor Pure Wrestling champ, because he looks just like Wheeler Yuta. The hardest, yet prettiest part of the ring. He's pretty, Kyle. Kyle, welcome back. How are you, brother?
What's up? No, so someone called me Wheeler Yuta like a long time ago. And I was like, dude, you're out of your mind. But then like 10 people separately, like independently, have been like, you look exactly like that guy. It's like, I guess.
Listen, you're Wheeler Yuta. I get Keith Lee all the time.
Seth Rogen.
Oh, you're not Keith Lee?
No, surprisingly enough.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I don't have a hot Asian wife.
You don't have the white hair.
And joining us, rounding out this quartet, is the Beyonce to my Hova. She is the Bonnie to my Clyde. She is the brains behind the operation, the boss bitch, Miss Al. Allison, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. It's an easy night. We're going to break down some European title. But first, before we do any of that, I always start every week with the same question, gentlemen. I'm going to ask you first, Rickie. You're the first timer. You're here. What has you pissed off for greatness this week, man? What has you the most worked up in the world of professional wrestling?
In the world of professional wrestling, all right, because I had something personal. I was like, you know what? Screw that person. What has me the most worked up? Is it weird to say a hug? Got me the most worked up.
Not enough hugs. Do you need a hug?
I probably do need a hug. But no, that hug was all types of therapeutic and awesome. And hopefully they won't stop saying that somebody needs to be in the main event for a title because they just got a hug where he's going to main event, hopefully, on another night.
Maybe.
I like that. I could see that. I think all of this is long from over, and I think some of it might even linger around after Mania for sure.
That's very true. But yeah, no, I think it's the hug that's got me pissed off for greatness. I love it. It's just another chapter in what is going to be arguably, whenever it's over, the greatest wrestling story ever told.
I'm definitely it's going to be on the Mount Rushmores just about no matter what.
Yeah.
Kyle, what about you, brother? What has you pissed off for greatness?
Oh, pissed off for greatness. So pissed off for greatness. This means I'm mad at something, correct?
Yeah, what has you the most worked up? Good, bad, indifferent? You could be really happy about it. You could be really mad about it. It's just a generalized way. Yeah.
So this Iho de Viking character, the Viking boy, as he's known as. What has me pissed off for greatness is not him. Like, he's fine. You do your flips, wear your fuzzy, stupid jacket or whatever. You do you, Viking boy. I feel like fans on like all sorts of sides, like the conversation online is just annoying because as soon as the match was announced, which was him versus Kenny at Dynamite, and it's being booked as a dream match, and people on both sides are like, well, it's not a dream match, he didn't have any video packages, and other people are like, Google it. And then but people are like kind of fighting invisible people. It's that thing where it's like they're like trying to get ahead of it, but there's more people arguing about the arguing than there are people arguing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of things, but yeah.
Is it a dream match for either one of you? Oh, Iho de Vikingo versus Kenny Omega. Is that a dream match for either one of you?
Not me personally, but if it is for other people, then why am I going to yuck their yum, you know?
Hey, I love that. That's our phrase. We say that all the time.
Okay.
We don't yuck any yums. I mean, I absolutely love the luchador style wrestling. Al, one of your favorite matches you've ever seen live, you've talked about it a lot, was the luchador, the fatal 6-way luchador match at Ric Flair's last match, and El Hijo was there in that match, and he was ridiculous, and they walked the ropes and did all the flips, so I'm here for it. I don't think that just because you open the forbidden door every time you do it doesn't make it a dream match, though. You know, it could just be a really great match. You know, it is a wrestling show, so it could just be a really great match.
Yeah, I'm not against it. A little like Kyle said, I don't want to yuck somebody's yum. But I saw it, and then my first thought was, is he ripping off Santos Escobar when he came in as Alejo del Fantasma? You know, and then I had to, and then so my first reaction was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, is he just ripping off Santos right now? But I looked into it a little bit more, and I was like, oh, okay, he's legit. But I was just like, that sounds awfully familiar. And then my next thought was like, I wonder what the Viking Raiders think about this. But that's kind of where it stopped, you know. So if we're gonna have a match, let them have a match. And you know, the one thing about the Forbidden Door, and I will just leave it just to provoke a little bit of thought. Was there ever an actual door that was forbidden when it comes to the AE dubs and the independent? There's nothing really forbidden there. People have been coming and going through that door for a long time. It's not even locked. There's not even a key. It's just there.
That phrase needs to be put in a barrel and lit on fire.
Absolutely.
They have a show, Ring of Honor, where New Japan titles are defended weekly. There's nothing forbidden about it. There's no door. It's just an open chasm in the wall that people just go back and forth through now.
And to be honest with you, Ring of Honor started it first. It was called War of the Worlds. It was really successful for a long time.
See, I'll even go with you, Rickie, one step further. Is I've tried as much as I can in my journalistic career to bury that term, because it started even well before War of the Worlds, because WCW did it in 1994 with When Worlds Collide, when they did the Super Show with AAA. And a lot of people forget about that, and I wrote about it because I was like, WCW was doing this before. NWA did it before. That's pretty much how Jim Crockett, I mean, I just talked about it last night on a different show. That's what Jim Crockett did at the very end, right before he sold to Ted Turner. He took all the remaining territories and just kind of bottlenecked them together, you know what I mean? And started using them as like feeder systems off of one another.
Yeah, 95 WCW with Starrcade.
For sure.
The New Japan, what do they call that? The wasn't War of the Worlds. It was something, but it was the same kind of thing. It was
the
WCW.
Collision in Korea. Is that what you're thinking about?
No, it was
Collision in Korea. What a show!
But that too. Yeah.
But I mean, another Forbidden Door example. Right. Yeah,
that's a true Forbidden Door.
I'll show you a Forbidden Door.
Oh, yeah, Antonio Inoki had the key to that door.
Yeah, I hope not.
And Inoki had a key to plenty of Forbidden Doors, I have a feeling, in Japan.
No keys needed.
Al, what has you pissed off for greatness? You got anything for us this week?
I'm gonna say I feel like this build to Mania has been like really lackluster. It's like January came and they're like, oh yeah, WrestleMania is in 3 months. We're good. We don't need to start building anything. And then like last week they're like, fuck. Okay, let's throw some shit together. Other than like the bloodline stuff and like kind of Rhea and Charlotte, like everything's very like haphazardly built, in my opinion.
I kind of, because there's a lot of good built-in stories, but it feels like they're dragging their feet and executing that on screen.
Yeah, they're definitely dragging Charlotte. They're dragging anything involving the women's titles. Let's be honest. Outside of the tag title, which surprisingly actually have some sort of storyline, they're not which aren't even going to be defended at Mania. The women's title scenes are lackluster in and of itself. Number one, that's I think the base because of who they pitted against each other. I think a lot of us were hoping that, well, I know I can only speak for myself, but I was hoping that Bianca finishes off the four horsewomen and beats Charlotte. That's what I was hoping for. I thought that was a sign, seal, and deliver. And then it was Bianca versus Asuka / Kana. I was like, oh, okay. And then they dragged their feet with that. And so I'm just like, come on, guys, let's get it together.
Yeah. It's like, I guess this could be a secondary pissed off for greatness, but it's like, you know, they're running all these promos like, blah, 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 it's Women's History Month. Like, let's celebrate our women. You literally have 1.5, maybe, women's matches per show in, like, as far as, like, the main 2 shows. NXT's a little different, but, like, come on. Like, you gonna make women's month, like, promos, but you're gonna give us shitty women's matches? Like, please. Yeah, it's pretty terrible.
How do we feel about this this women's tag showcase at WrestleMania now that apparently is going to happen?
They're trying.
It's just random women's tag teams. Might as well just have the stupid vagina trophy battle royal again. Like
they're trying. I think they want to get away from the battle royal, which I totally understand because it leads to absolutely nothing, which is an easy fix if you ask me. But yeah, no, I've been really against these tag titles for a very, very long time. It doesn't do anybody any help in the long run. What I believe would help, and I will always be on my soapbox for this, is they need a mid-card title. Just don't name it after a television channel.
I've been screaming the women's mid-card title for a long time. And
it does so much wonders. Look what it does for the men's divisions.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's there. I think they
get a
could
women's European title, perhaps.
Ooh, that's a good segue.
That's what we call a tease in the business.
That's a
tease.
Right. Before we get there, though, to the meat and potatoes of the conversation, if you will, this is the weekly part of the show that Allison gets to run. So I'm gonna send it up to the boss bitch for news and rumors.
I get to run. That's clever.
It's really your show. I'm just here.
Right.
Good save.
So, my first news and rumors is Bianca Belair is now the longest reigning African American champion, male or female, in WWE history. Yay!
Good for
I love her. She's amazing.
Well deserved.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, who was second? It was MVP she beat, right?
I think so.
It's probably MVP. They didn't give Kofi that long. Kofi got a healthy run, but he got F5'd out of that run. No pun intended, but totally pun intended.
Yeah.
Bianca deserves it. She is essentially... Bianca is what we thought Bayley was going to be, and she is the female John Cena.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, Bayley's just not my favorite for whatever reason. I know, like, everybody just loves her, but I just she doesn't do it for me.
She had a good run during the Thunderdome era, but everything she's done, in my opinion, everything she's done, she's come back, has been lackluster.
Golden Lovers. I remember the Golden Best. It wasn't Golden Lovers, it was Golden Best Friends or something like that. They called themselves.
The Role Models, I believe.
Role Models, my fault.
Yes,
it's the Role Models. I should know this. I'm a Sasha Mark. But yeah.
Hours, yeah.
Golden Role Models. Now, she won points with me. Like, when she turned heel on the first Fox SmackDown, I was like, oh, this is different. And it took a while for me to warm up to it. But then she started the pandemic and she started just annihilating Cole. And I was like, you've won. I'm sold on you.
Yeah. I mean...
But she did out of boredom.
Yeah. She almost seems, like, timid to me in the ring now. Like, she's afraid she's going to get hurt again. Like, she just seems like she moves really slow in the ring.
Yeah, she's never been particularly... Like, she's had a good amount of really good matches, but she's never been particularly, like, smooth in the ring, in my opinion.
You don't really see Bayley and see workhorse.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's very character heavy.
Yeah. Which is great for her.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But the nothing's really... No story has really stuck. Damage control is... Yikes. But,
I thought they would...
No.
I thought they would give a revigoration to the women's division. Because when they first debuted at SummerSlam, like, in the building, it was electric. Bayley coming out, then Dakota coming out, then Io coming out. You thought this was going to be that, like, next step for the women's division. It would bring life back to kind of a floundering women's tag team division, which it did in some ways. But then I felt like they took so many unnecessary L's. Like, Bayley was... She went through that, like, Miz-esque run where she was just losing pay-per-view match after pay-per-view match. And I get wanting to, like, help get people over, but if you're building her as one of your top heels and she just constantly catches L's, it's hard for them to gain any traction, and it's been almost a year now.
Yeah, it's bad. They are the Judgment Day without a Dominic. Because, like, Judgment Day was the same way. They were great, looks great on paper. That faction looks fantastic on paper, but they kept losing. You didn't really give them any titles to do, and someone needed to catch fire. And unfortunately, it was Dominic that caught fire, and now they're kind of relevant. And Damage Control just doesn't have their Dominic, which is surprising with somebody who's leading it, who's so character based like Bailey. And I think it's because they don't have titles, and they're always like kind of they're they're with each other too much.
They need to establish themselves. They need their individual identities and then the identity of the group. But when you see one or the other, it's like the group can't constantly be there to bail out people taking those losses. You know what I mean? Kind of tied into what I was saying too. But full circle, give Bianca her roses. She's arguably the biggest star in the company right now, male or female. She's up there at the top for sure. She's had a spectacular run. People want to say Roman's nearing that 1,000-day mark, and they forget that Bianca won this title a year ago at Mania and has defended it often and well. And so props to her. She deserves everything about it. The people that she was able to beat out also, everything they did to deserve those titles. But Bianca she's a rock star,
Mrs. WrestleMania, arguably, as well.
Yeah. We're still so early in her run, too. It's crazy.
Which is wild.
When it's all said and done, I mean, she's going to be one of, if not the best, to ever do it.
Yeah.
At least in the women, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
She needs to take out Charlotte. Charlotte needs to be taken out by Bianca at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. My next thing is Masha Slamovich wins the GCW World title, defeating the King of the Deathmatch, Nick Gage, at GCW's Eye for an Eye.
Are either of you Masha fans?
No, first time I actually hear the name, I'll have to do some research. I do know Nick Gage, and he's a crazy man.
Masha just did. She got at Botch Bots and Chair Shots, the shameless plug over at the .com. We gave Masha and Jordan Grace women's match of the year last year from Impact Wrestling. And Masha's been on this Matt Cardona style Queen of the Indies run that's been ridiculous. So for her to get the props and go into GCW in a very hostile environment and win their world title off of Nick fucking Gage, man. Like, you just say his name and that's all it needs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've seen a bit of her in Impact, but not enough. I really need to dive more into her catalog, because I always hear, because I saw like a bunch of people posting about this, her winning at GCW. It's like it's giving them a buzz, so it's obviously a big deal.
Yeah, she had a good run against Mickie James too in Impact.
She did. We saw that at Victory Road.
Yes.
That was in that whole thing building up to the Mickie James match when they were doing like the trade-offs, and they did all they set the stipulations for the matches against them and who they had to wrestle, and and that was building to Mickie versus Masha. That was a super cool story. Happy for Masha. She deserves it. Way to go, kid.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, congrats.
Sure. Next is Carrie Silken, former Ring of Honor executive, joins in a Twitter battle between Ric Flair and Dutch Mantell. Dutch is saying that Ric Flair owes him $41,000. Is this a worksheet between two old dudes just trying to stay relevant?
Oh no, this is definitely a work. Ric Flair probably owes him $41,000. I wholeheartedly believe that.
That checks out.
Yeah,
that's the one part that probably is true.
Yeah, the rest of it is probably just them working each other. No, Ric Flair probably does completely owe Dutch Mantell $41,000. I totally believe that. That man is horrible with money.
He's been broke a few times in and out of his career for somebody who wears $10,000 watches all the time.
Vince has personally bailed him out of a couple of divorces, I believe.
And there's always been the question of like the payouts for his legal troubles, because you know like that's the question. People are like, he really hasn't had any legal trouble. And that's what you got to think about is how much money does one have to spend? Because everybody's seen the documentaries about it, how much he drank and how much he partied and how much, like everything that is Ric Flair that he did. So
And that was only the ESPN documentary.
Just because he drank and partied doesn't mean that he did anything terrible.
Hal Siegel, are you defending Ric Flair right now?
I mean, I'm just saying, like, he may not be always the best, but there is no one has ever, except for, like, the airplane ride from hell, no one else has ever really come out and said that, like, Rick has been inappropriate with them. So, right. I would think with as much as has come out about Vince and everyone else that, like, Rick would be part of that as well. So...
Listen, if it's one thing that we know, it's that Vince is not afraid to pay somebody off.
$20 million worth of hush money.
And that was just in this century. We're not even talking about like 1980s or 1990s, because
when it was
look back at some of those Dark Side of the Rings, that has Vince's hand all over it.
Yeah.
So many of them did.
Yeah. Next, Mick Foley teases possible return for Friday before Mania. Maybe inducting someone into the Hall of Fame. He did make a joke audition video for the Judgment Day, which was hilarious. If you haven't seen it, you need to go watch, because, like,
that's great.
Every
That's
time
amazing.
The camera cuts back to him, he draws another tear on his face.
That's amazing.
Fantastic. Go find it and watch it. I mean, Mick Foley is a gem, so I would love to see him back on TV, even if it's just one day.
Yeah, didn't he say on his podcast that he got a call from somebody to induct them into the Hall of Fame?
I
think possibly.
Maybe.
Was it?
I don't know who that would be.
Who's inducting Muta? Have they said yet?
No, they haven't said it. I'm glad they actually announced the Hall of Fame to begin with.
I would think that Shinsuke would induct Muta, but I don't know. I think they're mad at each other, or Muta's mad at Shinsuke.
He get kicked too hard in his last match? Like, what happened?
No, Shinsuke kissed him at the end of the match, and Muta's, old school, and it made him very uncomfortable.
Well, how else do you block mist?
By sucking it in your mouth and spitting it back on top. You know what I mean? Like, he mama bred the shit out of that mist. Yeah.
Yeah, just don't give him the opportunity to open his mouth. You just seal it shut, seal it with a kiss.
Right.
And how long did they plan? How long did they plan that finish before they got there? Before Muta was like, "Oh shit, that's right. Here's the mouth-to-mouth part we've been talking about for 2 days."
I like to think he didn't know it was coming. Personally.
Yeah.
Shinsuke called that one on the fly. He had no idea.
The shoot kid. Yeah.
Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me.
Pulls, I'm sorry, I love you, and actually like kisses him.
Yeah.
I can't fight these urges anymore.
That's the twist nobody saw coming.
Exactly.
Let's see. On After the Bell, Corey Graves says that Jey Uso is the most complete WWE star. Does this hold any weight? Is Jey the most complete WWE star? I mean, I would say maybe.
He's up there. He's up there. I have been saying for a long time he deserved a Golden Globe. He deserved an Oscar nomination for all the work he's put in the last 3 years of this storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Every chapter, every turn. And if you really deep dive into it, the Bloodline story is literally about Jey Uso. It's not about Roman. It's clearly about Jey. However, it is hard to beat the character that is Roman Reigns post spearing Braun Strowman during the pandemic SummerSlam. Ever since then, I don't think Roman's missed once at all. From matches to the way that he works the crowd, the way that he works his emotions, his body language. I think Roman is the most complete wrestler in all of wrestling. Character and I mean, moveset you can argue, but he's got everything else.
True. But he has not won. He's maybe in the last year won a match on his own. Every win he has been a dirty assist from one of the Bloodline members.
But that's kind of the appeal to the Bloodline story, though. You know,
Yeah.
what I
Right,
mean?
but I mean, it's not just. But that's what I'm saying. Like Roman by himself may not be the complete package, but the Bloodline as a whole, like Roman by himself without the Bloodline, I don't think would be as popular right now. It's all the pieces together.
You can say the same about Jay as well.
So,
Yeah.
true.
I feel like when you think about going all the way back to where this all started with the Hell in a Cell match with Jey Uso and Jimmy running in
Theater.
and
Cinema,
saving his-
Martin Scorsese. Cinema.
so good, and saving his brother's life and calling him out and them acknowledging Roman, and then that being the snowball that became where we're at now. And a lot of people want to say that Sammy was that focal point, but who had their doubts about Sammy? Jay did. Who was the most important that finally had, Sammy's back? It was when Jay decided to have Sammy's back. All the way up to the super kick a couple weeks ago when he, rejoined with Jimmy in the ring. Like, Jay has been that pivot point more times than not throughout the last 2 years of this story.
Mm-hmm. He was the main event for SmackDown for a long time. And he proved that he could be the main event.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue against Sammy, though, too. I mean, he was a very crucial variable that had to be added, because if it just stayed Usos and Roman, it definitely would have gotten stale. It would have dragged. It would have petered out. But
Sammy just got lucky because they weren't going to run with this for long. He came at the right time.
Yeah, he's been super capable, though. I mean, it's just he's been looking for his way to really capture attention of the audience. Like, he's always been good. Since he was El Generico, he's been fantastic.
Yeah.
On the mic, in the ring, and so is Jey Uso. The Usos, man, they were cutting promos like in 2016, like when they did that brand extension again. It's like, God, the Usos are so good on the mic. When they were doing the stuff with the New Day, I was like, man, I wish these guys had like a main event focal point, and now they do, and now they're finally getting their chance to dance in front of the camera, which is awesome. So,
and Sam's getting a chance too to do some of his best work since he was a babyface in NXT.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best character work he's gotten, because people hated Sammy for a while. When he was dancing around looking like Fidel Castro, which I thought was absolutely hysterical.
I kind of liked conspiracy theory Sammy a little bit.
I love
Because you
conspiracy
love
theory
conspiracy
Sammy. I loved conspiracy theory Sammy too. I thought he was very entertaining, but he hit a ceiling. He hit a ceiling for a while, and then he had the slow morph into being that lovable, and people are going to be mad at me. He got the slow morph to being a lovable loser again. Because every babyface Sammy story ends with him getting annihilated by somebody he thinks is his best friend.
That lovable underdog. That's kind of always been who he was, all the way back to the NXT bangers with Shinsuke. It was that lovable underdog thing.
Yeah, and he got it back again.
Playing a little bit of devil's advocate here on the subject of the Bloodline. Do y'all think that the Bloodline story as a whole is taking up too much TV time and is not leaving enough room for other stories to build? Because WWE is putting so much into this Bloodline story that all the other stories are suffering. Even Cody's own storyline is tied into the Bloodline. Like, he doesn't even have his own real story going on right now.
That's always been WWE's MO. I mean, look in the Attitude Era, and look how much the Vince versus Mr. McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin dominated their shows for almost 2 years, 2 to 3 years or so. That was the only thing everybody talked about, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because when you have a story that's that damn good, like the Bloodline storyline has been, I think it transcends the general audience and goes into the general population of people, where people are tuning in to see like what's going on with this. Why is everybody talking about this? And you have a face like Roman, who he passes the airport test. He kind of stands out. At the time, Stone Cold Steve Austin kind of stood out because he was that everyman that went up against his boss, and people could relate to that. And I think people relate to Roman or are at some point intrigued by him outside of just the general wrestling audience. And I think they dominate because it brings people in and it makes money. And I think that's just a consequence of that storyline being so good that it kind of just makes everybody else's storyline just not seem as good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think other stories are getting time. I think it's just like Ray and Dom, for example. They get time every week, but it's just they're dragging their feet with it. Every week it's the same. Dom and Ray are in the ring. Dom wants to fight. Ray doesn't. It's been that for several weeks in a row. They haven't really evolved that much. So, but it's a good, like I said, it's a good built-in story. They just aren't really doing anything on screen to really. There's no pivot points. There's no peaks and valleys. It's just a flat line. Same can be said about a bunch of others like Charlotte and Rhea. Like, they have the time. It might not be a lot of time. And yes, maybe they could cut it down. Maybe they don't need to do both Raw and SmackDown stuff for the Bloodline, or maybe just cut it down a little bit. But other stories are getting time. I just don't think a lot are really hitting it out of the park as of right now.
I think you just need that gateway story to bring people in, and then you can kind of work with everything else.
Yeah. Also, in terms of Cody being involved, I think he has to be involved in the Bloodline story. They can't really just pretend like it's two different universes. And I think the way they kind of intertwine it has actually been very good. Because they're not, Cody and Sammy kind of working together prevents that potential of them kind of like of the audience being like, oh, I wish Sammy was in the spot. Like it all works together, and I think the way they've done it has been okay.
They're beginning to split them. The hug is the beginning of the split of the stories now that we're like 2 weeks out from Mania.
Yeah.
Cool. During the Undertaker's one-man show, he says that it has been hard to be retired from the ring, and never say never. Do you think we might see an Undertaker match at Mania?
If they're desperate, maybe. I listen. Michelle McCool wants this man to stop doing this. Like, you can see it in her face. Like, and also, I want Mark to stop. I don't want Mr. Calloway to end up like Sting. Okay.
A shell of himself.
Jumping off things for the sake of jumping off things in face paint. Like, just the more crippled Jeff Hardy at this point in his career. But, like, Mark, you had your ending. You had the perfect ending at WrestleMania 33. I was there. We all cried. We all put our fists in the air. And then you came back. And you did it a couple more times. And you literally rode off into the sunset in the greatest cinematic match of all time against AJ Styles, who was the perfect opponent to end your career on. Don't do this. Don't do this.
You know, though, there's a part of his brain that's like, man,
I could still go. Yeah.
Like, I need a match in front of people.
He sees what they're doing now, and he's like, I could make a run for the IC title against Gunther. Like,
actually, if that's the match,
I'm down for that, yeah.
Matt Cardona teases Mania return, calling back at Lashley's open challenge in absence of Bray Wyatt.
Sure, have him get his ass kicked. If that's what we're gonna do. Otherwise, mid Cardona doesn't really do much for me.
No.
Yeah, listen, I'm a Long Island born and raised. I'm a big Long Island wrestler. Wrestler who can make it fan. Like MJF, my boy, I don't care how vile he is. He is a vile person because he's from Plainview, Long Island, New York, and I know that town rather well. It's kind of shitty. You know, and Cardona's kind of also from a shittier place, but like he's okay. And like, listen, I love me some Matt Cardona. I love the woo woo. My first WrestleMania match I ever saw, he beat Miz for the IC title. You know, it was the greatest moment of my life up to that point. And, you know, then he dropped it and was irrelevant ever since. But sometimes Cardona's just good in a loss. And him coming back to get cheered and then completely annihilated by Bobby Lashley in the matter of Rock beating Eric Rowan is perfect. It's the perfect comedy spot for WrestleMania.
Yeah,
he can lose. Him and Chelsea Green can be the Karen and Kevin of WWE.
I could care less, honestly, about either of them. I literally have no fucks to give about Chelsea Green. Like, absolute zero.
So annoying.
Like, I don't
love her.
understand. Like, she's not, to me, she's not adding anything to this women's division. Like, they already don't use the good talent that they have. Why are they bringing in a mediocre talent and giving her actual screen time when...
Gotta have a tomato can to throw at Bianca Belair to squash.
Listen, you need a backstage comedy bit when Maximum Male models are busy. And she's been that comedy bit at the moment.
I don't hate the team of her and Carmella, personally.
I don't hate it either. I kind of like it.
I think it works. They have a unique kind of character to them. So if they
And
want to
Carmella
decide
can
to
work. I'll give Carmella credit.
Yeah.
She can get in the ring.
Carmella can go, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we need Chelsea Green to lobby for a women's mid-card title. Just annoy Adam Pearce until he just makes it himself.
You might be joking, but that sounds like a thing they could do.
I think that could
You
actually
know,
work.
I wouldn't be mad at it, to be fair. Just a couple of things I added here at the end. Something I didn't put on here, but maybe, I don't know if we can talk about it, sure. So, Bray's missing. He's got some mysterious injury. Do we think he actually has a mysterious injury, or is he actually fighting with creative?
Both.
I think both are very realistic, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, mentally, I don't think Bray's the most stable person. That's nothing against him. I just think he's dealing with a lot of stuff that he's never really evoked he's never really went public with it. He probably used his character as some sort of a therapeutic way or some sort of a mask, and I think that has probably run out with what creative has given him, and they probably want him to move in another direction. He's probably not comfortable with it for something that we probably don't know about. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, we've seen it on screen. His story hasn't really progressed much since he's debuted, so I could easily see him being frustrated by that. But at the same time, we've seen things like with Keith Lee, how he had that issue that kept him off screen and wasn't really public. So I'm not saying it's going to be that or something that's severe, but it could be. So we just don't know.
Yeah, the thing with Bray, I think, is that Bray, if you look at the Wyndham Rotunda, his shoot guy Wyndham, he is kind of in like a beautiful mind type person where he has this vision. I don't think he can really divvy from that vision at all. And it's probably a great vision. Like we've seen when they've given him kind of some freedom, what he can do. And it is some of the most unique things in all of wrestling. But at some point, like you said, Kyle, he has to progress and has to lead somewhere. And I don't think in Bray's creative mind, as brilliant as it is, I don't think he has an end goal. I think he misses that part of a story a lot.
Yeah, I think, because that's even back to his days of The Fiend or even farther than that. Like, he always had this great character, like this persona with the backstory, but never like culminated to anything. It would just lead to him losing and then rinse, repeat. And
or getting burned, which is actually kind of amazing.
A broken clock's right twice a day.
Yeah. One of my last thing, AEW house shows are in full swing. However, there have been lots of videos posted online and unhappy attendees claiming that the show was full of botches. It was a complete botch fest. This last, there's a video compilation that was put up of Britt Baker and Anna Jay. I watched a little bit of it. Not awesome, to say the least.
It's not surprising to say the least, given
not surprising
the
at
two
all.
involved.
Yeah, I think Britt Baker gets a lot of credit that is not deserved. She's the best of the mediocre women of AEW.
She's the only one that can handle, that can do well on the mic, and that might not be from her. It's probably from her baby.
Right.
Just hanging out listening to Adam cut promos on himself in the bathroom.
While he's brushing his teeth, probably.
But actually, though.
Finishes his teeth, he goes, boom! And spits it out. I'm not surprised by this at all, like Kyle said. It is... I mean, if you've seen AEW TV or even some of their horrible endings to their pay-per-views, like the exploding barbed wire death match, which if you put it to the music of Celine Dion, it is amazing.
I've seen that TikTok.
Yeah, I think AEW suffers in this aspect because they still kind of have that, as I like to coin it, the stench of the indies on them, and they still haven't gotten like they are very kind of laissez-faire. What I think how they just operate and how they operate their talent. Where like when Adam Cole went there, I was like, oh, he's going on vacation to play with his friends, and I think they lack that sort of discipline that the WWE kind of instills in their workers. Like the camera's always on for WWE, even at a house show. And I mean, historically, Mr. McMahon used the house shows as a way to gauge whether or not a talent can draw and whether or not they need to use them more on TV. AEW has a good formula, like how their house shows are called House Rules, which I love. I think that's awesome name. And you can get a little bit more creative because the cameras usually aren't really on. Same thing with WWE live events, but you still need to be kind of disciplined in what you do. You can't always be botching.
Yeah.
Especially when everybody has cameras.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen the whole house show just on Twitter from it. So, but I mean, it's a house show. It's meant to work out the kinks. And like Katie said in the chat, like Anna did just come back from injuries. So
yeah.
We're working out, just trying to get back into the swing of things. So I didn't see the full compilation. I saw like a few things. I was like, I like cringed and turned it off. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's what these house shows are there for. WWE used to do them a bunch. Yeah. They did them in OVW. They did them in FCW. They did them in NXT originally, where they would do these house shows on these, little podunk. They would do WWE shows in like middle school gyms just so the NXT guys and FCW guys could get out there and just get reps.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was one of the things you and I were talking about earlier, Al. We were talking about somebody not getting the reps in. And now that AEW is doing these house shows, that's what they're going to allow. Some of this stuff will stop happening as frequent. At least it's happening in house shows now, and it's not happening on live TV like we used to see during the Daily's Place stuff. And some of the, some of those horrific matches that Luchasaurus was putting on, or El Pentico or Serpentico or whatever his name was.
Matt Sydal botching his own finisher.
Yeah, stuff like that. We were seeing this stuff on live TV, 2 years ago during the pandemic. So at least they've smartened up enough to put it in a house show so they can get these guys used to working at a pro level in a fast tempo and not have to worry about, a million people seeing it. Now it's just going to be the 250 and a couple hundred followers on Twitter or whatever it turns out to be.
Yeah, house shows are great. Practice makes perfect. I'm all for it. And as long as they keep this going, listen, a House Rules tour leading up to all their major shows, I think that does wonders for them. It's also an extra source of revenue for them as well. So it should, in theory, work out the best. They just gotta work it out and see what they're gonna do and what's gonna make it different from the glorified house show that is AEW Rampage or Dark or Other Dark or whatever.
Elevation.
Dark.
Oh, it's a Dark Elevation.
And Dark Elevation. And
I was going to call it like
De-escalation.
AEW Perfect Dark. Like that's a video game.
Don't forget their upcoming, their new Saturday afternoon show coming up.
Oh, All Access?
No, Collision or whatever the hell it's called. Like the 6:05 p.m. show.
Yeah, 6:05 to 7:05. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing another hour pre-taped show. So they'll have 4 hours of pre-taped. 2 on YouTube, 1 on TNT on Friday, and 1 on TNT on Saturday.
They had Shotgun Saturday Night is right there, guys. Come on. You really want to do Collision? Like, it's right there.
Don't forget their reality. Did you say their reality show that they're...
Yeah, All Access.
Yeah, All Access is coming as well, yeah.
Honestly, I'm interested in that because I'm just like, there's a disaster there somewhere. It's like, I love, like, one of my favorite shows, my guilty pleasure is Cheaters. Like, I love watching Cheaters. I'm like, there's a disaster here somewhere. And that's what I feel like All Access is. It's there. There's something there that is going to grab me. But I'm just like, oh, yeah, let the car wreck happen.
That's why I like watching things like Cops. You know what I mean? Like, It's that train wreck you can't watch away from. Like, yeah, I want to watch this meth head from Podunk, nowhere, Tennessee. Like, yes, I want to watch this happen in real time.
Listen, if they don't cover the backstage fight between Kenny, the Bucks, and Punk and everybody, then it's not worth doing all that. That's got to be the first show. It's got to be the first show.
Dramatization of it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Dark Side of the Ring style, even where it's just like silhouettes of people like throwing chairs and dogs
somebody
barking.
running up and biting Kenny Omega.
Savannah. No.
Listen, that's got to be the first episode, or else I will never watch it.
I'm like them following Britt Baker and Adam Cole through his injury. Like, that's literally going to be 90% of the show. His injury and recovery.
I'm sure there's a lot to it, because, he was messed up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Major concussion, that's tough to come back from. And TK he's probably going to want to paint the positive picture of, I didn't rush him back. He came back at his own pace. Here's the story of his recovery. He's going to want to paint that picture because AEW catches a lot of flack for the guys with how they perform and how risky they are in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is it for news and rumor.
That's it.
All right.
Well, here it comes. The part of the episode everybody's waiting for. It's the history of the strap. Kyle, I don't think you've done one of these yet. You've been on a couple different episodes. Rickie, what we do here, the general idea is going to be, we're going to discuss a specific title, kind of go through its history, talk about certain storylines, maybe specific matches, definitely talk a lot about the men who held the belt.
Yeah.
So starting with the European title, the British Bulldog won the inaugural European title by beating Owen Hart in Berlin, Germany, which was kind of, that was a big deal. They took the show over there. They won it. Since then, before they retired it in 2001-ish, I think, 27 men held it, including Davey Boy himself. He was the longest, reigning at 205 days. D'Lo and Regal both held it 4 separate times for the record. Mark Henry was the largest, and Spike Dudley was the smallest. When I say the European title, though, a lot of people have different emotions about what that title was to them as a wrestling fan. When I say it to you guys, though, the three of you, what are your first thoughts when you hear the European title? Rickie, you want to go first?
Yeah, when I first think of the European title, I initially think, because for me, he was like the European champion, because he always changed where in Europe he was from, like every week, and that's D'Lo Brown. Nice. D'Lo Brown, for me, made that title, which also made his character. Like, D'Lo Brown pretty much never won anything else, but he won the European title. I also think about early Degeneration X Shawn Michaels holding the European title. And then I think of towards its end, which I quickly Wikipedia'd up, but I also remembered towards the end, Kurt Angle calling himself the Eurocontinental Champion and that being a thing for a while, adding to his initial smugness as Kurt Angle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's one of those titles that I want. As you can probably see back, I have the newest version of the United States title behind me, but I do collect belts, and the European title is like number 1 on my list to get, because I just like, to me, that mix with the Intercontinental, a world title, and the tag title, that's the original Grand Slam for me.
Yeah.
Kyle, what about you?
I was gonna say D'Lo too, because he's somebody in the chat said that D'Lo is who they think of too, and I think it's like such a problem because he was like, I guess probably the hottest period for the European title was probably like the late 90s when he was like, D'Lo also was a Eurocontinental champion, I believe. That was definitely the hottest period of his career. And then later on, there was like a period where it like wasn't there really. It was kind of like on pre-shows and stuff like that. Then towards the end, it was kind of like the title that William Regal always had, it felt like, which makes sense. He's European. But I don't know. It just seemed, ultimately though, overall, it felt like a pretty meaningless title. It didn't really have any differentiation between that and like in the Intercontinental title, which is kind of similar, when we compare like the AEW International Championship to like the TNT Championship. I think it's like kind of a similar thing where it's like, is it too many titles? Because at some point you just dilute your other titles when you just keep adding belts to win.
So after he won the initial tournament, British Bulldog eventually lost the belt to HBK. When he got it, he was holding the WWE World's Heavyweight Champion, or he ended up winning the title a little bit after he won the European title. Euro first, then the World's title. This is exactly what you were talking about, Ricky. This was China walking around holding the belts for Shawn, DX. Yep. These guys were kind of running the roost, so to speak. When you think about 1997 Shawn Michaels, Kyle, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it the Euro title, or do you always go to the Winged Eagle DX Shawn Michaels?
You know, it's funny because I believe this is 97 when him and Triple H, I think they kind of like had a mock feel like they were pretending to be feuding against each other, like they were having they were at odds, quote unquote. Yeah. And they had a match in the ring for the European title, and then they basically did a finger poke of doom type deal where Triple H beat him and then took the European title, and Shawn was like, "Oh no!" and then they did a whole thing. So that's what I think of when I think of 97 Shawn. So I guess both, to answer your question.
The Sergeant Slaughter thing is what you're talking about, because he was the commissioner at the time. And what happened was Triple H had won a series of matches because Shawn wasn't defending that title. And it turned out like Triple H won it, so now he had to defend it against Shawn, or Shawn had to defend it against Trips, and it went back and forth, and it was this whole thing. Then he was made to actually defend it against Goldust, and then Goldust got involved with it, and then he eventually dropped it. And it got tossed around. This is a theme I'm going to ask the first time, and then it comes up later. Between 1997 and 1998, there were 6 title changes that happened on Raw. The WWE's never really had a TV title, and Kyle, you said that it was one of those like titles that were there. It was definitely a mid-card title, but sometimes it really didn't carry a lot of meaning, it felt. Did you ever see this title as being WWE's TV title because of how often it was defended on Raw and then later on SmackDown?
Well, it's fun because like late 90s, early 2000s WWE, they kind of fell into a thing where there was just like a ton of title matches every week, especially when the Invasion came along and the titles pretty much doubled. Like it seemed like every match was a title match. So, like I said, I mean, I guess in a way it could have been considered a TV title, but no more or no less than the Intercontinental, because I feel like it was on the same frequency of being defended on TV. So they just did nothing to separate, like, what, because European was ultimately, it was the lower card, whereas Intercontinental was the mid card, and that's what it was. But they could have done a little bit more, like have some, I mean, it's a European title, have some international influence, like what the All Atlantic title was originally when it was kind of like the traveling belt, like make it something like that. But they just never really carried forward with that.
Mickey, what do you think?
I did see it as kind of a TV title because I always put the Intercontinental title like at a higher prestige. But I think they both worked in the same way, which is probably the reason that they ended up just combining them at the end, was they were used to elevate talent. But I think having kind of that tiered system really helps to give the viewer a perspective of where the person's at, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I think a TV title is something that can or should return for something like the women's division, where you can just run rampant and they can all win the title or whatever. We can complain about that on another podcast, but at least they're getting time, at least they're defending something, at least it gives them the opportunity to develop their character in front of a camera instead of backstage segments or hiding them in a tag team forever and a day, because not everybody can fight for that same red or blue themed women's title. But in terms of the European, I did see it as it was a good stepping stone for a lot of people. And like if you look at the lineage, it worked.
A lot of guys that held the IC title, held tag titles, eventual world champions in a lot of way. Yeah. Ted, thanks for stopping by, bud. Good to see you. Ted Hillbilly Hill on the Hill Truth stopped by on YouTube. He got off of some socials. So it's a rare appearance by Ted. It's good to see my man.
Hey, Ted.
So kind of playing off of that, both of you mentioned somebody specific when you were talking about this title, and that's D'Lo Brown. Between July and October in 1998, D'Lo Brown and X-Pac traded the title back and forth like 4 times. It was very reminiscent of the people are calling it the hot potato title now in AEW with the TNT title. Maybe I think Katie and I were talking about it. It's traded hands at least once every month so far in 2023. And that's kind of what happened between July and October in 1998. D'Lo would have it and X-Pac would have it, then D'Lo would get it back. So before we get into D'Lo, X-Pac, Sean Waltman. Al, I'm actually going to start with you on this one because you haven't said much at all. This is that weird area of wrestling for you where you've seen a lot, but you weren't watching wrestling when you lived it. Looking at who X-Pac was in DX versus X-Pac as the singles competitor, did you ever see him as anything more of that six-man or playing off the bench kind of role?
No, he comes across as like, he's always going to be part of that bigger group, not super important. Like, I feel like if the 24/7 division was still a thing, he would probably be in those circles.
That's hard. That's hard.
It's true though. It's kind of true. He's like the funny guy that just kind of hangs out.
Kyle, what's your opinions on Mr. Waltman? He's a Hall of Fame member as a member of NWO. He's a Hall of Fame member as a member of DX.
Sneaky two-time Hall of Famer, that guy.
Multi-time tag team champion, Euro champion, cruiserweight champion, light heavyweight champion. The man had a hell of a run. But do you see Sean Waltman as a viable, singles competitor? Is he always stuck in these factions?
I think X-Pac, Sean Waltman, I think he's super underrated. I think he's done so much and has done a variety of things. I don't think he ever had the promo ability to be a top guy, but there's nothing wrong with being that workhorse guy in the middle or maybe even lower. I think there's several wrestlers that have said this in the past. I know Chris Jericho said it in his book that Sean Waltman was kind of the benchmark at the time when he came in, early 2000s. It's like, if you can't have a good match with X-Pac, you can't have a good match. That was what the company kind of saw in him. He wasn't very good. He's a good hand, but he had a really unique style for the time. The martial arts stuff, you weren't seeing everybody do that like they are today. So I thought he had a unique look, a unique style, and like I say, even he was stuck in factions a lot, but he broke out on his own at certain points. I will say this: his TNA run in 2005 was very obscure, but it was fantastic. He had a match against AJ Styles that was phenomenal. Okay, phenomenal. It was great.
I see what you did there, Kyle. I see what you did there.
Falls out of my face. He had a great match with Raven in TNA. That kind of showed his chops as a singles, and it's stuff that I've watched kind of recently. So he definitely had the ability to be something as an individual. I just think he was really prominent in an era where there were just stars upon star. Rock, Austin, it was just all of those guys, and X-Pac's not gonna really outdo those guys. So
yeah, when it comes to who he was partnered with, he was never going to outshine them, which really stinks for him because, like I said, if you look at him in the ring, he's actually really good in the ring. He's really, really good in the ring, but you can't think of X-Pac without thinking about Sean or Triple H or China, or his time in the NWO, or the time he returned from the NWO and immediately joined DX, and where he screamed at the camera for 5 minutes. And he also kind of suffers from the worker's curse. Mm-hmm. He's just really good, and they don't not allow him, but they didn't need him to do anything else. They just needed him to work.
He's along the same boat as a Shelton Benjamin, in my opinion. He's a fantastic worker. He's just never been a character-based wrestler to where he had that larger-than-life Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins or something. He just wasn't that kind of a person. He was just a good worker and a good hand. Also, somebody else during that trade-off in that 97 run, another guy who was a huge part of another faction in the Nation of Domination. He broke through there. He held tag gold. He held IC gold, Euro gold. I think he even held a hardcore title maybe at some point, but that's D'Lo Brown. When I put this out last week on Twitter, when I first started talking about this episode, the unanimous decision across the board from everybody when I posted a simple picture of the Euro title, and I was like, who's the first person that comes to mind when you see this? Hand over foot, 1,000%, everybody said D'Lo Brown. I'm going to go in reverse order now. Rickie, I'm going to start with you. D'Lo Brown, both as a singles competitor plus his work inside a nation that developed into one of those quintessential mid-card champions. You know, when you think about late 90s Attitude Era WWE, D'Lo Brown was that. He always held a mid-card title, but never seemed to be more than that. What do you think about D'Lo?
I think that's fine. Like, I think the interesting thing about D'Lo Brown is something that reminds you of what Roman Reigns said when he was comparing his time in that faction formerly known as the Shield to every other faction, where like the faction of a nation of domination kind of helped to elevate a lot of people. It helped Dwayne, it helped Mark. Didn't really help Kama Mustafa because he had to become a pimp.
That led to him becoming the Godfather, though.
Yeah, that's true. But it also helped to elevate D'Lo. And once he was out of it, he used the title helped make D'Lo Brown a memorable singles competitor. Sometimes a person makes a title, sometimes a title makes the person. The European title and D'Lo Brown are essentially synonymous with each other. Like the D'Lo Brown coming down the ring, hands in the air, bulletproof vest for reasons we don't know, shaking his head like it's about to fall off of his shoulders, is the only European title entrance that I even remember or care to remember, because that's just the first image I get, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We're still talking about him, and without that European title, we're probably not talking about D'Lo Brown. He's just another figure that just so happened to be wrestling during the Attitude Era.
Kyle, it's up to you now.
Yeah, D'Lo, I mean, he really shined when it was the Nation versus DX. I think that's when he became the European Intercontinental Champion, or maybe it was right after. But man, the whole mishap with draws really ruined him. You could see his confidence basically be zapped. I mean, it's hard to blame him, but he was off TV for a while, and then they put him in that team with one of the headbangers. I forget which one, Thrasher maybe.
They look the same to me.
Whoever Beaver Cleavage is, they're in a tag team together.
My God, Beaver.
With
wow.
Tiger Ali Singh, I think his name was. It was just a stupid gimmick. Never went anywhere. That was off TV. Then D'Lo comes back in 2002. Basically has this gimmick where all the refs hate him because he's black. And he's wrestling in jeans and a jersey. And I think this is when Teddy Long comes in and Rodney Mack. There's a whole weird thing there. So, yeah, I think it all went downhill after the draws thing, unfortunately for him. He did some good stuff after. I mean, he had a couple spots in TNA and Ring of Honor even that kind of went under the radar. So, but yeah, I don't think anything ever was better for him than when he was in the Nation going against DX as the Euro Continental Champion.
Shaking his head everywhere. I don't know how he didn't break his neck.
It's so iconic. Whenever anybody sees somebody shaking their head like that, there's these D'Lo Brown.
Yeah.
So he's made an impact for sure.
Another guy that went to, ironically, Impact and had a good run there. D'Lo is a backstage coach. He does production roles. He's been in commentary. He's had a successful post-WWE career as well in other promotions, being that behind. And he's another one of those, when we were talking about X-Pac, we said he was a good hand. D'Lo is another. And he gave himself
Absolutely.
a lot of flack because of what happened with draws. And that's along the same lines. It's just a freak accident that happened in the ring.
It's hard to get over sometimes, man.
Yeah,
and
it's the Rich Holland and Big E. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a bump that was taken. And, there's differing opinions on it, but it's hard to come back after that. And he did lose it in ring. But I see his production work and the coaching and everything he's doing with Impact. And I was like, okay, he still found that groove post WWE. And I think he's been successful with what he's doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he has.
Al, have you ever seen a D'Lo Brown match? Are we gonna need to go down that rabbit hole?
You
We are
do.
gonna need to go down that rabbit hole. I think
Just the
maybe-
entrance alone.
like, yeah, I think I've seen maybe him in Impact, at least on commentary, because he just stopped doing commentary for them like last year.
They had switched over to what's his name, the Drama King Matt somebody,
Something.
but Matt took over when D'Lo left the commentary table with Impact, I believe. I was curious if you had seen much of the Nation. Hey, thanks for the follow, Mr. Freds.
Yeah, Freds. Thanks, buddy.
For the follow. Yeah, Matt, the Ruholt, Matt, the Drama King. So,
Yeah.
when X-Pac had the European title, he ended up in a feud with Shane McMahon. And during this point, Shane wins the belt from X-Pac in a confusing stipulation of a match where Shane got the win for the title from X-Pac by beating him in a tag team match. It was this weird mess of a stipulation that was happening. This was the first run of Shane being the best in the world. He didn't call himself that, but ultimately what happened was Shane got the belt. He retired the European Championship when he retired from in-ring work to retire as an undefeated champion. When you see this,
Brilliant.
this reoccurring theme with Shane McMahon, is he really just as much as we hate to say it, he's been successful playing the same character over and over again. Is Shane McMahon low-key a fucking genius character work-wise?
Yes. Yeah, he found what works, and we never like stop wanting more of it. But I think it's because he's not there all the time. So he's popular by scarcity. Like, look when he returned into Detroit, people lost it. Absolutely lost it. When he threw himself off the Hell in a Cell,
Yeah.
I lost it. We're like,
The,
oh
the
my
cage
god, is
match
he
with
okay?
Braun, where he got thrown off the top. He's like
Oh,
Sting.
yeah.
He climbs up to the top of shit and he just falls off of really high things for no reason. Like, that's what Shane
Jeff-
McMahon does.
It's a Jeff Hardy model.
Yeah.
Like last year's Rumble. He was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
because he's not there all the time, and I think that's the genius of it. He pops in, he does these things that people still talk about to this day, like when Steve Blackman hit him and he fell off the SummerSlam stage.
That was a ridiculous bump. Way higher
Yeah.
than the Hell in a Cell bump that Mankind took. Granted, he went through boxes and airbags and stuff to take the bump. But it was still, that's like a movie stunt style bump, man. He jumped a couple
Yeah.
stories off.
Falling backwards.
He got
terrifying.
suplexed he got suplexed by the Miz off of that state.
And caught the win on that bullshit call because the way he was laying, he was pinning the
brilliant
Miz or
call.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean?
Brilliant call. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
I also think he just likes to give his dad a heart attack.
Looking at Shane, though, from a different perspective, when you see the different roles that he's held inside the WWE, I'll do a shameless plug here for when Russo was on the show and I interviewed him. Russo spoke super highly of Shane for everything that Shane was a piece of. Shane was very vital in the forming and the origins of where DX came from. He was vital backstage with what was happening with the Ministry of Darkness. Shane was he was the youngest of the McMahon kids. Or no, he's not the youngest, sorry. He was like younger than everybody else on the McMahon regime, so he kind of had his pulse of society and the young up-and-comers. Like, is Shane a sleeper for some of the best ideas as well that came through because he was that young kid that was working with everybody?
Yeah.
When you look
Yeah.
at who was the head brass in WWF at the time, I mean, Vince, Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe. I mean, yeah, you got to think Shane's got to be that jolt of perspective of, like you said, the younger generation. So yeah, I can definitely see him being a crucial part of that.
Listen, Shane has had some great ideas that Vince never listened to. Like Shane said, you should buy UFC, and Vince never did that. And look how that turned out for him. And I think Shane was that guy in the room when they're trying to talk about DX and these other things. And Shane probably just said, Dad, they're cool. This will work. And that's probably how it happened. That's how I see it in my head. He was like, Dad, I'm the same age as all of these people in the crowd. It's gonna work.
Speaking of Shane, he led to one of the most unique title changes in WWE history. Mr. Fritz gave me my segue for it. At one point on Raw, Mideon was going through Shane's bag looking for some athletic tape, and he came across what you couldn't see because of the shot initially, but Mideon's like, yo, bro, I found this old belt. Can I borrow it for the night? And Shane's like, yeah, whatever, you can have it. And the next thing you know, Mideon walks out, and he's the European champion, just out of nowhere. Mideon's the new European champion. What are your thoughts when they kind of do these comedic style changes? Like, did it downplay the worth of the European title to do this? Was it already, like we've said, it's already at best a mid-card TV title at this point? But, like, do you care? Did it downplay at all the value of it by having this kind of comedic storyline where Mideon finds the belt and now he's the champ?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it diminishes the appeal of it. I mean, you don't have to beat somebody to win. You take it and it's yours. But, like, do I have a problem with it? I mean, if they're not going to really do anything to give it life, I mean, you might as well have it as a prop to have another lower tier story. So I guess if that's essentially what it was. It was a way. It was almost like kind of like a litmus test in a way for like the lower tier guys. Like, if you can have good showings for the Euro title on a pre-show or an early match on a pay-per-view or whatever it is, then maybe we'll do something with you. So I think for that purpose, it was fine for what it was.
Yeah, I think it does diminish it because it was taken very seriously for a long time. Like, you had Davey Boy Smith win it and Shawn Michaels win it and everybody like that, and then like Mideon finds it in a duffel bag. Like, this is 24/7 titles type stuff or hardcore title.
That's what I thought,
type
honestly.
Stuff.
When I went back and rewatched it, I was like, this is very much 24/7 title vibes for him to find it in a gym bag.
Yeah, which I'm very surprised that they didn't use that in the 24/7 title. Like, R-Truth's going through stuff. It's like, hey, can I have this? Oh yeah, whatever, you can take it. And he like runs away with it.
Well, that is how they started it. That's how the inaugural champion was crowned. Is that Mick Foley?
The first one to run into the ring, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was Titus O'Neil, right? We just talked about this on trivia the other night.
Mm-hmm.
Well played, baby.
We did, however, get a run of some really technical superstars after the Mideon debacle before it was eventually retired with the Euro-Continental unification match between RVD and Jeff Hardy. During this run, where there was a little bit elevation to it, we saw some really great fucking technical workers hold the belt. Eddie Guerrero, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, William Regal, and then two people on this list that were both sleepers. And Kyle, I know watching when you do your reviews on Apron Bump, two guys that are fantastic workers that kind of got overshadowed again because of the character-based draws of this area WWE, Perry Saturn and Al Snow.
Two great workers. Yeah, I don't remember. I can't say I recall their runs.
No, that's kind of the joke of it, is they're great workers, but nobody fucking remembers them because of everything else that was happening. Al Snow's running OVW now, and Perry Saturn, there's no telling what Perry Saturn's doing.
I don't think he's doing well, from what I know.
Yeah?
Doing better than he was.
Well, okay, well, that's a good sign, because I know initially, like, he was not doing great at all. Like, not one bit.
But Al Snow, great guy, the whole head gimmick, most dangerous toys in America because of the whole mannequin head with his Barbie doll stuff. But on the left side of this list, you've got arguably four of the best in-ring workers to come through the WCW WWF merger in Benoit, Guerrero, Angle, and Regal. Like, these guys were all fantastic workers. They were all fantastic talkers. When you have a run that has these kinds of names attached to it, did we elevate the prestige of the title at all, guys, towards the end of it? Did we elevate it at all by having such talented workers hold the title again by the end of the Euro title run?
No, I think it was already at its end, and I mean, outside of D'Lo, it didn't really elevate. Like, Regal was kind of already a known commodity. Eddie Guerrero was known all over the freaking world. So was Benoit and everything. So it didn't really help them, but I think WWE probably used it again as the litmus test. Like, okay, you're good, but how good are you in front of our crowd and things like that? So we'll put the European title on you, see how you run. And clearly that worked, because most of them became big-time champions or big-time characters after that.
Mm-hmm. They did. I don't know if that's necessarily attributed to the European title though. And yeah, and I agree. I feel like even probably the moment that Shane McMahon won it, I think the title was dead in the water. I could be wrong on the specific shot. I think it was Backlash 2001. There was a European title match. It was Matt Hardy versus Christian versus Eddie Guerrero. Which on paper sounds amazing, but you watch the match, you will never hear a more quiet crowd in your life. Like nobody cared about the title. Nobody cared who won. I don't even remember who won that match. So to you,
Jeff Hardy.
Again, Jeff Hardy.
Yeah.
No, there was one with Matt Hardy.
I know that because it's in my notes because that was right before him and RVD.
Jeff Hardy was, yes.
He was the last person to hold it before the unification match.
Right. By the way, I also could be wrong about that. I think the unification was actually the European and the hardcore title.
Was it?
And then because Kiing was the Intercontinental Champion, and that got folded up with the World Heavyweight title. That's a really wacky era, though, so I'm not sure.
So yeah, it's a wild era of mergers because they needed to get rid of some titles.
Well, towards the end of it, before it was merged, whatever the case was, this goes back to the whole TV title argument thing. In the life of the title, there were 29 TV changes where the title changes on TV in its history. There were only 10 where it changed on pay-per-view. So I'm asking this a second time. Did WWE not cash in on the fact that they had a viable option for a TV title and never used it as such? They either made it into a comedy routine with Mideon, or they could never get the traction on it with the guys like your Guerreros and stuff because they immediately catapulted into the main event for a world title or an IC title. Could WWE have done more with this belt if they had just pushed it to be an actual TV title? Because they were booking it like that, obviously, with 30 changes in the title's history on television. Like, that's how it was being booked. So could they have done more with it if they just accepted that's what it was?
Absolutely. I think it also came from a couple of factors why they didn't change the name. I think it's because they had the acquisition of WCW, and at that time, anything WCW, they were probably going to try to can, anyways. And WCW had that television title. I mean, I think also the European title kind of lost its luster because you had the Intercontinental title. And when you think about it word-wise, yes, one's representing a continent, the other one's representing pretty much all the continents. And then you have the world title. So I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot, and they were just like, all right, how are we going to do this? Like, and then someone's like, we should merge them. And someone's like, oh my God, brilliant. And that's what they did. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think they couldn't find a way to put TV in it. And by the fact of the Intercontinental title being what it is, or what it was at that time, the European title by default just lost luster. Because they tried to put it on these people that they already acquired, and those guys were already good. They didn't need the title. They were already names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, I mean, the Intercontinental title was essentially that TV title. That's basically how it was presented at the time. And, the European title, I mean, like I said, especially when the Invasion came along, it was just another title, whatever, SmackDown, we have a little segment here that's free. Throw a European title match in there. Who cares? Who cares who's in it?
Sunday Night Heat.
Yeah. Actually, though, yeah, that's much where it lived for a while. So I did enjoy maybe a quick bright spot of the European title was towards the end when William Regal had it, because he just cherished that title so much. It meant so much to him.
It's his baby.
Yeah. So, and then I think this is when like Spike Dudley, I think, beat him for it or something. And it was like, okay, we got something here. We got something cooking a little bit. It's tied to the European aspect of it, so that's where the story resides. So towards the end of it, they did a few okay things, but ultimately just didn't really do anything more than that.
There were 4 people in the history that had held the Eurocontinental title, where they held the European and the IC title together. Kurt Angle, D'Lo, Jeff Jarrett, and RVD. RVD held the title for less than a day because it was once again reunited with either the IC or the Hardcore, whichever the case was when it was unified. RVD was the last person to technically hold it. So, looking at that list, a question for you is your favorite European champion. From the way the conversation bet, I feel like all 3 of us are going to say D'Lo, right?
Absolutely, the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair assumption.
Yeah.
Do you think D'Lo was, with looking at Kurt Angle, Jeff Jarrett, RVD, holding the 4 best, because Kurt Angle, Jeff Jarrett, RVD, all Hall of Famers, do you still look at that and go, he's the number 1 for the Eurocontinental Championship then? Using that same logic, does it work that way, or do you go, well, maybe not, because Jeff Jarrett had such historical IC title runs, but you never think of Jeff Jarrett as the European champion, though? At least I don't.
I don't. I think of him as the Intercontinental. I think of D'Lo just as the European champion. Like the Eurocontinental thing, really just, I pair that with Kurt Angle because he was so smug about it. He was like Olympic gold medalist and your Eurocontinental champion. He made that a point every time he had both titles. That was his thing, and that's probably why it sticks out for me.
It was the old the WrestleMania 2000, right? When it was the triple threat match where he defended both titles.
And he lost to the 2 different people, yeah.
Yes.
It was a 2 out of 3 falls match or something like that, wasn't
Yeah, the
it?
first fall was for one title, the second fall was for the other one.
Against Benoit and Jericho.
Correct. Yeah. Final question then before we get ready to wrap it up, guys. Now with NXT Europe getting ready to come back, do you think there's any chance we see the Euro title make a run again? Are they going to bring it back and use it over there? Nostalgia, banking off of it and hoping that it does something and helps put some butts in seats with a little bit of draw?
I'd love it. I think people would be pretty receptive to it too, just for the nostalgia of it.
Yeah, 1,000%. It needs to be. When they announced NXT Europe, I was like, the European title's coming back. And it's not only going to go through the history of it, because you have names like Kurt and Sean and Jeff and Jeff, because there's 2 Jeffs in there, with it. But now it's going to have that, that rebranded NXT shine. And that's going to be their world title. And I think that's a great thing for NXT Europe to say, like, all right, there's a history to this title, but now we're going to elevate it as the end-all, be-all for NXT Europe. And I think it's going to hold so much more weight.
Yeah, and then D'Lo will have to be in that inaugural tournament for it, right?
Yeah.
Just for a shot at it.
Yeah.
D'Lo or Regal. I mean, whenever Regal's contractually allowed to show up on TV, I think that's the perfect person to either hand the old title to the champion, or what WWE will probably do, give it a total new coat of paint, and the redesigned championship should come from Regal and or D'Lo. Or D'Lo should be around.
Well, I think RVD technically was the last champion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the
By
last
the way,
one to hold the Euro champion.
To correct myself, so I think Rob Van Dam was the Intercontinental champion. Tommy Dreamer was the hardcore champion. They merged that into one title, and then yes, it was RVD versus Jeff Hardy for the European and Intercontinental. So you were right, yeah.
See, we were both right, Kyle. We were both right.
We got there eventually.
You talked about one merger. I was talking about a separate one. But they all went together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys. Well, the good news is we made it. We did all the damage we could do for one night. I usually try to be as punctual as I can be with these kinds of things, but this is everybody's favorite part of the episode because I don't have to say anything. I just sit here and ask you guys to plug yourself and put yourself over and tell us what's going on. So, Rickie, I'm going to let you go first, man. Tell us what's going on with Wrestling Addicts Radio and Kings of the Ring.
All right, so yeah, obviously this is King Rickie Rozay, the general manager of Wrestle Addict Radio, our tagline, the cure for the common wrestling podcast. We are a network of podcasts, which includes my show, the Kings of the Rings podcast at KOTR_podcast across all social media. We do a live streaming show, simulcast on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Across all of our KOTR socials and I think our Wrestle Addict Radio YouTube and our Wrestle Addict Radio Twitter as well. That goes live at 8 o'clock with a pre-show at 7:30 and then a post-show where we just talk about random stuff. I think this week on the Kings of the Rings podcast show, I'm going to be having my own guest from the great state of Wisconsin, Miss Taylor Jade, who I'll probably be contacting after I'm done with this show just to talk particulars. We're going to be talking about her love of Jon Moxley. I see there's also another John Moxley fan. All things AEW, especially that freaking bar mitzvah, and the build to WrestleMania and so on and so forth. To plug my other shows, Mr. Frets has his own show. Mr. Frets is in the chat, the Fretzelmania podcast, where it is a retro wrestling review, particularly of the Ruthless Aggression era, because he particularly goes 20 years in the past and reviews those SmackDown. So he's coming up on a very good show, WrestleMania 19, which will be coming up very, very soon. We also have the Young Lions Perspective podcast, which is done every Saturday by my friend Mr. YLP, who I would like to call the Stephen A. Smith of wrestling podcast. He's very brash, he's very in your face, and he does not back down from anybody, and that's why I love him. So he has his own News of the Week show on Saturdays. Then we also have our Brace for Impact podcast from Nate the Effing Great, or Nate the Game Changer Great. He does reviews of the Impact Wrestling brand. So I think he's still in his TNA phase, but I think they're going to he's going to get to the Impact rebrand very, very soon. So you can find all of us at Wrestle Addict Radio, which is at Wrestle Addict Radio, all one word, across all social medias, except on Twitter, because someone else took Wrestle Addict Radio on Twitter. So follow us on Twitter at addict_wrestle. And then the links to all of our stuff are all in all of our socials. We have merch and all that great stuff, because I'm wearing some of our merch right now. So,
Kyle, what's going on over at Apron Bump?
Not much. We're just talking wrestling and stuff. The Apron Bump podcast got a lot going on over there. I cover companies big and small across 4 different decades. Will's been on it. Rickie, Allison, I'll have to get you on it sometime. I've had Brett, I've had Nate. Cover all different companies. Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, Progress Wrestling, TNA, Ring of Honor, all sorts of stuff. I got a TNA episode that dropped last Wednesday, Victory Road 2006, and we'll be covering WrestleMania 12 this Wednesday, which should be fun, especially given the recent Iron Man match that happened and WrestleMania season and all that. So that'll be a fun time. So Apron Bump on all the social medias, on YouTube as well, and wherever you listen to podcasts and OnlyFans and Chatterbait and MySpace. So that's all I got.
Al, you're up.
You can find me on Twitter and TikTok at justagirl918. Sometime in the near to distant future, we will be rolling the my own show, the Boss Bitch Power Hour, where I will just be bitching with my girlfriends about life. There might be some wrestling mixed in, depending on who my guests are, but it's pretty much a I do what I want show.
Sign me up. I'm down.
Next week, even though I said it was going to be this week, but alas, here we are again. I say the same thing. There will be a new heel support group comic coming out. The heel support group is where I take my wrestling action figures, and I pose them and make little funny comics. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's all I've got.
It seems hard. I've seen people do that before. It seems very difficult.
You know what? It's trying to get the what everything's gonna say is really the hard part.
Script writing.
Yeah. So the premise is the main 2 characters. I have a MJF action figure, and I have a Seth Rollins action figure. And,
I want it. I want to see it right now.
I'll send you some of the more recent ones.
Yeah. And so, for legal purposes, it's called the heel support group with Max and Colby, because those are their real names. So it's just them with a bunch of shenanigans. We have Roman Reigns, we've got Austin Theory, we have The Rock, we have Mr. McMahon, we have Ric Flair. So they just kind of hang out and do stuff. We did have Becky and Charlotte, but since Becky and Charlotte aren't heels anymore, they got kicked out of the support group. Oh, we also have a Jim Cornette figure.
My favorite was after Vince left the company last summer, you did the whole series where you would do comics but Austin Theory would just randomly show up with the Money in the Bank briefcase, and he'd be like, I don't know what the fuck's happening anymore. I'm just showing up places.
Yeah.
I was like, that was one of those, like, chef kiss touches, because that's what he was doing on TV too. He was just randomly fucking showing up with the briefcase, and it'd be like a slide that had nothing to do with him, and then the next one he would just be there with the briefcase, and it'd be like, what's going on? And he'd be like, I have no idea anymore, guys.
Yeah.
No fucking clue what's happening in my career
And he'd
anymore.
like try to cash it in, and like at the weirdest times, like when the guys are having like a deep conversation, and they'd be like, not now. So
That's
Well,
amazing.
all right, a couple programming notes because Allison dropped off the call
hold
again.
on.
Tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we've got Dirty Belly debuting. It's a chef show featuring an executive sous chef of a nationally ranked steakhouse joining sides with a retired chef, stay-at-home dad. They're going to be talking about all things food and restaurant life. Tuesday, we've got nerdy news at 4:20. It's everybody's favorite time of day, mixed with the nerd news that we know and love. So we'll be talking about video games and movie trailers and stuff like that. Thursday night is trivia. My shout-outs this week. Follow JB Wrestling Fan for Life, Game Changer Wrestling, the Huge Pop Wrestling Podcast, Free Talk Wrestling, Big Mike the Hill, the Geeks and Noobs Network with Self Bet and Dad Hat and Super Beard and Jaxbo and CPG and Bree. Follow Creation Conversations with Lord Cussalot, Mara DeShark Watkins, MATTRIDDER, Matt Ritter, and Katie Kinsey, baby, SES Vince. Follow all my friends. But now, as we close another episode of Botched Pots and Share Shots, I want to take a minute and thank you for listening. Remind you to go wherever you do anything on the internet, like, follow, subscribe, unsubscribe, then subscribe again. Leave a comment telling me how great I am or how terrible I sound. Either way, it helps the algorithm and it helps find new listeners. If you're feeling really generous and be one of the VIP people, head over to patreon.com and donate to the Rivet City Radio Podcast Network. You get some fantastic swag, we get some fantastic guests. It's a win-win for the hardest part of the ring, the apron bump. Pretty Kyle. For the King of the Ring, Mr. Rickie Rozay. For the boss bitch, Miss Allison Siegel. I am the Will Gray. Thanks for stopping by and listening, my people.
Bye.